They wasn't sure what to do with him at Interscope, and that's why they signed him to G Unit to give him some validation and some, you know what I mean? I remember that whole shit.
It sounds like he wanted to do one with 50 Cent. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like Jim.
Nah, I don't want to do nothing with that sucker. You heard? Leave him out the conversation. Them niggas be on my dick, right? Them niggas ain't got nothing else to think about but Capo. I did a lot for them niggas in their life, you heard?
Jim Jones just set the internet on fire, and not in a good way. In an era where clout chasing is often disguised as confidence, he decided to take a bold swing at one of hip-hop's most respected lyricists, Nas. Yeah, that Nas. The man behind Illmatic, the rapper who many argue redefined storytelling in hip-hop. So when Jim, a Dipset veteran with his own legacy, claimed he's more influential than Nas, people weren't just confused, they were stunned. And not in the he made a good point kind of way, more like, what the hell is he talking about? This wasn't just a spicy take for Twitter, it was the latest chess move in a much deeper, more calculated game. A game that might not even be Jim's to play. But before we break down who's really pulling the strings, let's rewind. Jim wasn't always gunning for Nas. In fact, he used to sing his praises. He's publicly admitted that during his come-up, Nas was like a god to him, a lyrical king whose bars defined an entire era of rap. So what made him turn around and take shots at that very legacy? Did his ego finally catch up with his accomplishments? Or is this bigger than Jim? Possibly a move influenced by someone else, someone like Jay-Z? Because here's the thing, Jim's beef with Nas isn't happening in a vacuum. It's surfacing at a time when alliances in hip-hop are shifting rapidly, with power players making strategic moves that feel more like corporate takeovers than artistic disagreements. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, it starts to look like Jim's sudden shade toward Nas might be part of a broader agenda. The industry's real puppeteer might be none other than Jay-Z, who's known for playing the long game, often working through proxies to shape narratives without ever getting his hands dirty. Now, if you think that's a stretch, consider this. Jim Jones has had a complicated, borderline obsessive relationship with Jay-Z for years. There was a time when Jim openly dissed Hav, especially during the Rockefeller split, siding with Cameron and throwing jabs at the throne. But fast forward a few years, and you see a different Jim, one that's practically begging for Jay's approval. There's even a clip where Jim looks like he's pleading for a Roc Nation deal, despite having dissed the entire crew not long before. That's not loyalty, that's desperation, that's survival mode. And it's not just fans noticing this change. 50 Cent, never one to bite his tongue, called Jim a puppet, a man being used to stir the pot while someone else cooks the meal. 50 even implied that Jim's newfound anti-Nas rhetoric isn't about genuine beef or belief. It's about staying relevant, about keeping his name in headlines even if it means burning bridges with legends. And when you look at the timing, it's hard not to agree. Nas has been enjoying a massive resurgence thanks to his work with Hit Boy, dropping high-level projects that are getting Grammy nods and critical acclaim. Meanwhile, Jim's social media buzz is fading, his chart presence barely a blip. What better way to climb back into the conversation than by poking at a legacy? Still, Jim's argument isn't just emotional, it's statistical. He's been throwing around numbers like they're gospel, talking about streams, Billboard entries, viral moments. But let's be real, numbers don't always equal impact. Just because your song trends on TikTok doesn't mean you're shifting the culture. And that's what Nas has always done. Nas didn't need gimmicks. He didn't chase trends. He created timeless art that generations still study. You can't buy that kind of influence. Not with views, not with followers, and definitely not with empty bravado. That's why when Jim claimed to be more influential than Nas, the reaction was swift and brutal. Industry veterans like Jadakiss didn't even need to speak. One look at Jada's face during that viral podcast moment said everything. It was a mix of disbelief and embarrassment, like even he couldn't believe Jim was serious. Fans clapped back too, flooding timelines with reminders of Nas's impact, his conscious bars, his poetic flow, his role in shaping the DNA of modern hip-hop. They weren't just defending Nas, they were defending the culture. But here's where it gets even messier. The Nas versus Jim narrative is only one chapter in a bigger story. A story where Jay-Z is playing puppet master and Jim is just the latest pawn. This isn't new. Jay has always moved like a silent general, orchestrating battles while avoiding direct combat. From erasing verses off songs to backdoor deals, He's made a career out of manipulating industry narratives in his favor. And now it looks like he's using Jim to reignite old tensions with Nas, keeping both their names in the mix while he remains comfortably above the fray. And it's not just Jay-Z playing this game. 50 Cent is no stranger to these power moves either. But his approach is raw, direct, and unapologetic. He's always emphasized loyalty, even if it meant burning his own empire down. That's why he sees Jim as a sellout. Back in the day when G-Unit and Dipset were at odds, Jim tried to play both sides, attending G-Unit events, chasing a potential signing. 50 saw right through it and made sure to humiliate him publicly. That's the thing about 50. He'll test your character, and if you fail, he'll never let the world forget it. So where does this leave Jim Jones? Is he a misunderstood underdog trying to stake his claim in an unforgiving industry? Or is he just another rapper caught up in the illusion of relevance, willing to say anything for a little attention? Because when you boil it down, that's what this really is about. Relevance. Jim's not arguing about legacy. He's fighting to stay in the conversation. And in today's clout economy, disrespecting a legend might get you clicks, but it won't earn you respect. And let's not forget the generational divide here. Jim keeps talking about how the younger generation doesn't know Nas, how they see him as the influence. But that says more about what's wrong with hip-hop today than it does about Nas. If young fans are more familiar with TikTok dances than lyrical depth, that's not a win. That's a wake-up call. Nas represents an era when bars mattered, when albums told stories, when artists had something to say. Jim might be popular in the algorithm, but Nas lives in the culture's bloodstream. So when Jim flexes about streams and charts, it feels hollow, like watching someone wave around Monopoly money and call themselves rich. Legacy isn't about stats, it's about who remembers you when the noise dies down. And by that metric, Nas is untouchable. But here's the real kicker. This whole feud might not even be about Nas at all. It could be a calculated distraction, one orchestrated by Jay-Z to keep eyes off his own moves. By letting Jim be the mouthpiece, Jay can keep his hands clean while still taking subtle jabs at an old rival. And if Jim takes the backlash, so what? He's expendable. That's the cold truth. In the chessboard of hip-hop, not everyone's a king. Some are just pawns that think they're queens. In the end, Jim's quest for attention may earn him headlines, but it won't earn him the kind of respect that Nas commands effortlessly. And fans know it. They see through the noise. They remember the history. They know who really shaped the game and who's just talking about it. So, as the drama unfolds and more interviews drop, we're left with one burning question. Is Jim really that bold, or is he just being used? Because if he thinks trolling legends is the way into the Hall of Fame, he's in for a rude awakening. Legacy isn't something you can fake. You either have it or you don't. And right now, Jim Jones may be loud, but Nas is timeless. And that's the difference between a moment and a movement.